Hello, everybody. One Fun Guy podcast live in the studio with my guest today, Gina. Gina, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
My name is Gina. I live in Connecticut. I always have a whole bunch going on. Trying to, actually, it's interesting. I'm trying to change my niche on social media. So this is a great platform to talk about it.
Awesome. So let's start from social media to the beginning, right? Obviously, you network a lot with it. It's a great networking tool. What have been the pros that you found about social media so far in your business and
Yes,
adventures?
that's a great question. I mean, social media, as long as you manipulate it and utilize it correctly, drives a lot of sales. It drives who you are, it drives what you're trying to promote. And then, the algorithm hones in on it and really kind of lets it out into that niche. So, social media can really drive your who you are, and it can really help you make some money and really more and successful in your business, whatever goal that is.
Sure. What platforms of social media do you think are the best, in your opinion?
So before uh right around COVID, like, I knew TikTok existed, I knew Instagram existed, but I didn't use them. I solely used Facebook, and I don't really use Facebook all that much anymore. I do use it for specific things, but I find for me, uh, Instagram and TikTok and I have to start getting more into the TikTok because I really do think that that's kind of what's trending right now. But I really find Instagram and LinkedIn to be the most helpful.
Okay. Have you used YouTube in any form? Because
Yeah.
that's my, like, so I find personally that YouTube is the strongest only because of the fact that you can always change your platform on YouTube, but
Yeah.
it also can monetize you quicker if you're
Really?
actually looking to gain a little bit of income out of it as well because of the ad space. So I find personally that YouTube is the strongest for content creation, especially if you're going
Good
to
to
do
know.
something from start to finish, right? So a lot of people now, are starting to vlog themselves
Hmm.
more. So if they go out and they find a new coffee shop or they find a new restaurant, the nice thing about YouTube is long form because you can
Yes.
actually bring somebody with you through the entire journey.
Yes.
Where I believe like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok is the short, right? If you have a minute 30, that's what people are interested in is they're scrolling. But YouTube gives you the long form to show behind the scenes, have multiple channels, and then do things that,
Wow.
you can kind of integrate into each other. So you'll see a lot of YouTubers will have they'll put out a 25-minute or 30-minute long video, but then they'll also put a 15-minute behind the scenes video out of what it took to
Yes.
record that because people really are genuinely interested on what happens behind the scenes. We do this in a professional type setting, right? But
Right.
no one knows the pre-conversations we've had. No
Correct.
one knows how we met. No one knows. And so YouTube allows you if your guests are willing to participate in that because when you meet somebody for the first time and you're off camera, they're just in their loungewear, right? They might be
Correct.
in their pajamas or they might be in a
Right.
hoodie or they might,
Yeah.
and then when you want to go live with somebody, they're dolled up, right? They're
Yeah.
So a lot of times people are more interested in seeing the behind the scenes on how you met and how you interact socially because social media is in term that, right? It's social. And a
Correct.
lot of people are afraid to reach out to people and they
And I
don't
hate
want
that.
to, and right.
Yes.
And so I think that's where we need to start is like, not only influencers, but people on social media have to understand that the social aspect of it
Is
is
social.
meeting new people
Yes.
and networking that way where a lot of times people have the mindset, well, if I don't know you, I'm not going to add you, and then I don't want to get to know you because you're not in my circle, right?
Yes.
And
Correct.
so It's very difficult because a lot of people still on social media, even though it's social, are private, right? They
Yeah.
don't want to show pictures of their family. They don't want to show pictures of what they're doing. They don't want to make it social. They just want to have it for entertainment, which is perfectly fine. But if
Mhm.
you're trying to gain some traction in what you're doing and you're not using it, then there's no social aspect to it. It's just media
Correct.
at that point.
I
So
have
it's
to
a
tell you that I didn't even like YouTube didn't even for some reason YouTube didn't even come to my realm of thought. However, I have a YouTube channel and I
mhm.
actually have posted quite a bit. I didn't even think about that. And actually, you just proved a really good point because for what I'm trying to transition myself to, like a new career, YouTube is probably the most perfect place to do that.
Yes.
Now that I'm
Now,
thinking about it.
there's nothing wrong. So here's the thing with a lot of what happens on social media in
Mm,
terms of short form, right?
yep.
Say you are going to basically do whatever. I've seen a lot of people now are starting to get into the automotive world of things, right? Where van life is becoming super popular and people basically selling
Yep.
their homes and living on the road to see the country or see the world, right? If they want to drive through Canada or they want to drive through Mexico and get to South America.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing. But what happens is that you take a 5 hour drive in a van and only people want to see you at the beginning of your destination and then at the end of your destination. They're not caring about the drive. So people will fast forward all the way through, they'll cut
Mm,
and chop. But the nice thing about it is that there are people in long form that want to know what happens when you're on the road
yep.
because you have to stop and shower, you have to get gas, you have
And
to
I can tell you
refuel.
there are more people who like behind the scenes than
Yes.
who don't.
Right. And especially if you're going to get into it, right? You
Mhm.
want to find out what it's like to live in an RV or
Yes,
live in
and
a van.
sometimes
You're not just going to want
transparency
to
is
buy
key.
one.
Right, and
Right.
sometimes transparency is key, like, people wanna see you the authentic you in whatever area you choose, and so I think the long form for me, I could spend 2 hours on this podcast with you, no problem,
Right.
because I like that long
Sure.
form. I like that behind the scenes, and I've gotten lots of messages regarding certain platforms on how I grew and how I grow and how I did certain things. I don't have a huge following, but I grew faster than usual.
Yes.
And I think that I always share, always, because I feel like there is plenty of room.
Right. And
Mhm.
so my issue with a lot of the aspects of social media, right, is everyone tries to figure out the algorithm, right? I think it
Right.
morphs into its own little thing, right, based on what you're trying to do and who you're trying to do it with, right? So
Mhm.
in the podcast field, I'm competing with thousands, if not millions of other podcasters, right?
Correct.
But the reality is that a lot of times with podcasts, unless you are famous or you made it, you're not going to get guests because the famous people, quote unquote, right, don't want to take the time to do a interview with a small podcaster,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
my attitude is with the podcasting field is I would rather ask somebody with a huge following and have them say no than
Correct.
to have never asked at all and
Correct.
then not realize that they
Yep.
might have said, well, I'd have done it. I'd have taken an hour of my time
Correct.
to be on your
Absolutely.
show. So I
Mhm.
feel that a lot of times, people kind of have that starstruckness to them as well, where they're afraid to ask somebody to
Yeah.
be a guest on their podcast for fear
Absolutely.
that they're not going to say no. Now, a lot of big people, they don't run their own accounts, right? They have marketing people, they have their
Right.
own assistants, they have social media people where they just respond and post for social media. They're not doing it themselves. But if you don't take the chance and ask, you'll never know.
100%. Yes.
And I
That's a great
feel
point.
in our realm of doing things, right? Whether
Yeah.
you're creating any type of content,
Mhm.
you're always getting in your own head saying, well, I don't have a big channel. I don't have a big platform. No one's going to want to do this. But in reality, there are a lot of people that want their story to be heard. They want
Yes.
what they have going on. And so that's where I use my platform to basically say, what do you have going on?
Yeah.
And tell us about you. So
And it
that's,
goes the other way too. It goes the other way. Like, I'm a small time guest, right? I just reached out to a huge podcast host who's a celebrity.
mhm,
And what's the worst that could happen? They could say no, but I felt like my story was compelling enough that if they said no, in my mind, maybe a year from now, they're going to be like, who was that chick that emailed
Right.
us? Right. So I feel like the worst thing that could happen is they either ignore you or they say no, but you will never know, or say yes. I mean, it could be any other way, but I agree. Like, you have to take the risk.
Right. And it's like that in any venture, right? Like we're going to talk about, the business that you want to start and what your goals and aspirations are with that
I love
business.
it. Mhm.
But the reality is you have to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Nobody comes a pro at anything without putting in the work and effort. And I think we live in an era where it's instant gratification, right? You
Yes.
want to be a musician
Right
and
now.
you don't want to do the work to put in. You
Right.
just want to play the symphony, right? You
Uh-huh.
want to be at the top of the chain. And I
Mhm.
think the era now loses that, right? Like they don't
Correct.
realize what hard work and dedication it
Yeah.
takes to actually make it. When you've made it, then you feel that you still have room to grow. And
Yes.
there are a lot of people that like they just want to make it. And then once they've made it, they're like, okay, I've made it. Now I'll do something else. And
Right.
it's a very, weird thing with
It is.
even with starting a business, right? You're in a space where there might be hundreds of other people. What makes you stand out
Yeah.
versus, what you can do to maybe, broaden people's minds to say, listen, this is what I'm doing, but because I'm doing it this way, this is why I'm special or this is
Yeah.
why I'm unique, right?
Exactly. And
You know,
that's what brands want. That's what podcasts,
yeah,
that's what everybody wants, is a little bit of uniqueness. What makes you
sure.
stand out more than everybody else? And there are little ways on YouTube or any social media platform that you can do to be seen. I mean, I'll go to any length. I mean, shy
Hmm.
of inappropriateness, but
Sure.
I mean, I'll like blindly tag people in
Yeah,
my store, so that no one sees it, so that I'm being respectful, but I'm still tagging a celebrity. And if
right.
they see it, great. But that any kind of exposure
Yeah.
is the best way
I
to do it.
even, to be honest with you, I tag everybody and I
Me
don't do it
too.
blindly. I put it
Yes.
out there, right? Because if they're on social media and they're trying to grow and you want people to see you, right? And
Mhm.
you wear something that a celebrity might have worn and
Yep.
you tag the brand and you tag the celebrity, well, they've already done that, right? So like
Yep.
if you're wearing something that, a celebrity might have worn, whether it's a piece of jewelry or a shirt
Something.
or a hat or something,
Always
and
tag.
right, you have to, right? It's
Yes.
part of the thing, right? And
Yeah.
then not only doing the hashtags and tagging them, but then tagging the company too,
Yes.
right? Like I
Yep.
have no problem tagging a manufacturer that might have made something that another somebody wore, right? if,
Right.
if I'm able to get my hands on it or I'm able to do that, right? So it's a very unique thing.
Because literally it only takes one thing to go. It really just takes one little thing to go viral, or to blow up, right? As they
Right.
say. And it really could be just tagging a
Yeah.
brand, tagging a person, tagging an item, anything. So I'll go
Right.
tag crazy.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
most of the times when people blow up or they have that one video, it's the oops one, right? It's the
Yes.
one that they didn't really think
Yeah.
would do anything,
Mhm.
where it might just be you in a kitchen with your kid and your kid
Yeah.
does or says something off off cuff, and then that's what gets picked up. Now that video became viral because it was an oops moment that you didn't even really want to record it, but it made it, into the world.
And I feel like that
So,
circles back to, you have to put in the work, because without
yeah,
those constant recordings of
right.
content, that's putting in the work and like
Yeah,
going through it. Yeah, 100%.
sure. Yeah. So now with your business now, what made you want to start it and what kind of support did you have in doing that?
Oh gosh, that's like a loaded question. So I originally started my business during COVID, and that's how I grew really fast, was by doing all the things that we just talked about, right? Constantly posting, engaging, tagging, all of that. I mean, I'll even tag the musician who I put the music in for my content
Sure.
video. Like, I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And so I started during COVID refinishing furniture, and it grew very quickly and I loved it. I mean, I loved doing it. And then COVID sort of phased out and I had to go back to work and refinishing furniture became a side hustle. And that, unfortunately, it was doing very well if it was my only job. I just couldn't make it work. So I
Sure.
recently closed that business, which is fine because I can always do it as a side hustle, but I
Hmm.
like LLC closed it.
Right.
And then I decided if I was ever going to venture out and do anything new, I didn't want there to be any overhead. I wanted to kind of see if I could build it from zero up without putting any money in right now. And so, there have been some major changes in my life in the last 4 months, some traumatic changes, some shifts and stuff. And so I decided that what better way to change professions than to get into the public speaking arena. And
Hmm.
so I'm putting in the work by doing podcasts for free, obviously. I set a goal to reach out to 3 or 4 podcasters a week because on average, you're only going to get one back or none. And that's been pretty consistent and I've been pretty successful in it so far.
Hmm.
Um, so I would essentially, in the end, like to get paid to speak publicly in a
Sure.
specific niche. So that's
Right.
that's the goal ultimately,
Yeah.
and this is the start.
Right. So when you decided to do this, right now you're a public figure, right? And then you have a family. How are they in support of you doing this? Because it takes a team to do this, right? Like you
Mhm.
have to have that network and support behind you because once you're public, they become public.
Correct.
Are they on board with that?
So they are 100% on board and in support of me doing this. They feel like I was born to do something like this. Um, and because of me wanting to step into the public speaking arena, um, it would be on family trauma, not my husband and children, but
Sure.
family trauma and family abuse. And so that is a huge conversation to have to sit down and tell your 2 children that, hey, this is something that I want to speak out about, my
Right.
story. This is something that I need to do. And I have to tell you, they are my children, my 2 sons, and my husband have been the glue that binds me. I
Okay.
could not be sitting down without that support, like
Sure.
100%.
Right. So talking about your story from the beginning, right? We don't necessarily have to go in depths with that,
Mhm.
but does that seem to help other people? Have you noticed, like in the public speaking arena, right? Because I've done podcasts on mental health and stuff like that, and different people, and I've had a full circuit podcast, or I've had multiple guests. Do you feel the feedback now is a positive thing that this is going to keep you going, and then maybe eventually, writing it down and telling a story via book, or
Oh
like getting,
gosh. Yes, 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 and yes.
okay,
Um, so we just met, right? But I can tell you that if I brought my children and husband in here right now and they said what asked them what's one word that you would use to describe your mom, your wife, they would say determined. So
mm,
failure is not in my vocabulary.
sure,
And so I once I knew that that was what I wanted to do, it was full steam ahead, no looking back. It is hard to change careers or niches, like complete opposite at my
sure,
age, but uh it's going to be a road, absolutely. I didn't have a choice. I was
right,
thrown into it.
sure,
So for me, you know the situation and being who I am is driving me to make sure that I'm successful. So it is hard. Yeah. I mean, but
right,
I felt like, as soon as I verbalized it to my kids and husband, it was like they put a period on it and been like, you
yeah,
probably should have been doing this forever, mom.
right.
Yeah.
So, obviously, when you do something like this, you're marketing yourself, right? So you're investing in yourself. What are or who are some people that might have influenced you along the way where you might have saw a public speaker and says, that's something I could do, or this person is interested me, or now it caught my, like, who are some people that on a bigger platform that
Oh,
you
gosh.
admire or want to emulate?
So that's a great question. So I will tell you that what originally sort of lit the spark was a family member has a podcast. She is amazing. She is so intelligent. It's her name is Brittany Murphy. She has a podcast. She travels and speaks publicly. And when I saw how much she loved it and how rewarding it was for her, I always wanted to do that, but I was still
Sure.
kind of working my other job. And then when things changed, I instantly thought that. So, I mean, I feel like she was kind of like the spark for me. I love Mel Robbins.
Okay.
I think that she's had family trauma. And so I look at her as like just a pillar of
Sure.
absolute strength. Like,
Right.
it's just amazing, and so I definitely look up to her. Dr. Sherry Campbell is also someone that I communicate with her. She's so
Sure.
sweet. She has a humongous following, and she still makes time to communicate with me, which I think is
Right.
pretty honorable,
Yeah,
because when you
absolutely.
start to grow really big and you have 60, 70, 80,000 followers, even more, it's really hard to keep up. And whether it's her or her team doing it, I
Sure.
still think it's commendable because that means she's got a really good team on her side,
Right.
helping her maintain all of this. Um, I love one of the first people I did my podcast with. Her name is Karen Mitchell. She has a podcast called the Lioness Empress, and it's again about family trauma.
Hmm.
Um, she has been so very supportive and been inviting me onto her podcast more than once, and has invited me to possibly speak at a conference. So these are four women who, there's so many. The Boss Babe Hub, she's
Sure.
amazing. These are women that I looked at as, okay, they're big now, but they are, put the following aside, they just have a voice
Sure.
that people listen to. And so that's what I love about them.
Right.
There are some men, I mean,
Sure.
but for me, the family trauma thing is hones in on that whole woman aspect. But there's a couple spirituality podcasts that I love too, that I think are super important, or Instagram accounts that I follow that
Right.
are religious. So I find that those tend to be my kind of favorite.
Okay. How has the feedback been with
All positive.
you? Okay. And then how does somebody who might have had a great childhood find a relation to you where it might not have been so great, or in your mind not have been so great? Do you have the transition where people like are welcoming of your story, or do they like try to pick any inconsistencies out, or like how has that been
I'm sure
with
that's going to happen. If it has happened, I haven't seen it yet.
okay,
And that's okay. I kind of feel like when you put yourself out there and you decide to share any story, you open yourself to doubt and criticism.
right,
And that's fine as long as someone's listening. I don't
yeah,
care what you think at this point. I just want to keep the conversation going. And
right,
so far, it's been extremely receptive, but I also think that that's because it's an extraordinarily sensitive topic.
sure,
However, I do think at some point, someone is going to come along who is a sibling or a parent of a child in my position, and they may try and have a conversation with me that is doubting, questioning, challenging. And I'm absolutely open for that because, again, it keeps the conversation going, and that's okay. If you don't want to like me, that hurts me. Like, it eats at me when someone doesn't like me. However, I'm going to be 50, and there
right,
are tons of people who don't like me, who I've tried to get to like me, and they don't.
yeah,
So at this point, if you don't like me, if you like me, great, as long as you're listening, as long as the conversation is staying alive and is going, that's what I care about. And again, I just
sure,
want to bring it back that so far, it has been everyone has been so supportive on social media.
Okay.
Yeah, so much so that I've been invited back more than once. So I just want to knock on wood, just keep the conversation going.
Sure. Now, starting this from ground zero, like you said, and building up to where you're at now, if somebody's watching this and says, well, I have a story to tell, what steps would you tell them to take to get their voice heard? Like what worked for you and how you went from this thought to actually making a reality?
So I think that for me, the most successful so far has been the Facebook, be a guest, find, find a guest, be a guest. All of those sort of groups have helped me really expand. And actually, those groups on Facebook have given me some confidence. So, which has transitioned to me contacting podcasts on my own on other
Mhm.
social platforms. So it has been that Facebook group has been huge, and in turn has given me, that confidence. And I will, uh, I won't just do it on social media. Like I will go to their websites and fill out a
Sure.
form and
Yeah.
do all of that. So you really just through Facebook, like just research, a lot of research, and making sure that whoever I'm working with is legit and I'm safe working with them. But really putting in the work is sitting down for, a couple hours a day and really looking for what you want. And so again,
Sure.
Facebook has been actually more successful for me than Instagram.
Okay.
Instagram's allowed me to kind of market myself and say, hey,
Right.
here I am. I'd love to be a guest. I'd love to be, a speaker at your conference. But Facebook has been the one that has, that they've reached out to
Mhm.
me. I've reached out. It's just been more successful in that way right now. And I'm fairly new at it. So
Sure. Now, when you get ready to tell your story, if somebody goes into to asks major depth and detail about it, do you have a script you go off of? Do you just kind of wing it? Like, how do you prepare to actually go in
I
front
love
of
this
somebody?
question. I love this question. So I decided when I sat down and I decided that I was going to, do this, I originally thought, I don't want to plan a speech. I want to be as authentic as possible. I also wanted to make sure that the story felt raw every single time I told it. So for me, writing it down and memorizing it, I that is who I am as a person, ironically enough. But
Okay.
for this particular thing, I just wanted to just keep it raw. So I had decided at the beginning, every time I tell this story, I'm not going to, if I leave something out one day and not the other day, then that's what was meant to be told or
Sure.
left out. And so I'm trying to keep it authentic, but if I attend this conference I was invited to, I have to do a speech. But I think by then I will have told the story so many times that it shouldn't even be an issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you tell the story, do you keep it 100% serious? Do you add a little comedy? Are you witty? Like, how's your approach to this?
Great. Another great question. So I like to apologize in advance before I tell this story because I can be very quirky and reference like famous quotes or TV shows because that's my coping mechanism. And I will make like a small little joke right before or right after I tell something traumatic or serious because it's a coping mechanism. And I do think most of them are pretty, they're cute and quirky. So I try and keep it light when it's about to get really serious or right after it gets really tense. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then I wanted to touch too. Obviously, we are similar in age and we came from a generation that didn't have any form of social media, right? As kids, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have everything, right? Do
Mhm.
you think our generation was built more on a character base at that point versus a generation now where they grew up with tablets and laptops and cell phones? Is our generation like relatable to tell this story versus somebody who might be 16 now but doesn't understand what it would have been like to be 16 in the early 90s?
Mm,
Have you ever kind of taken a perspective of like a kid now that might be going through stuff, but their outlets are much different than our
yeah.
outlets were?
I think it is a completely different thing. Yeah. I think that uh, our generation, it swings back to, people who want to go viral right away and then not put in the work. I feel like that is the, you know, that's my kids' generation, the 16, the 15
Hmm.
through, 21. I think that people in our generation aren't afraid to put in the work, but navigating the whole social media thing is kind of new to us, right? So I think that we're capable because we have such great work ethic, like people born in our era. In terms of the younger kids, I think that they are just as valuable as us. I do. I hate the fact that kids in this generation are very uh, technological and have their heads buried in
Right.
a computer. I almost said book, computer or phone or what have you. But I do think that the generation of 16 through 19-year-olds, even 15, 14, 13 right now I just feel like they're a lot deeper than people think. And
Hmm.
I actually think that they can probably connect with a lot of stories that I could tell at their age and not even think twice about it. But
Hmm.
I do believe that they are valuable people who probably just I feel like COVID did something, it just
Sure.
changed
Oh, it
them a
was a
little bit.
reset for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
do think that that kind of age bracket is still a valuable age bracket for
Right.
anybody. I do. I think it's important. Do I think they get it? I mean, I don't know. I don't think I got much at 16 except
Sure.
sports, school, boyfriend. But
Yeah.
I do think that they are a lot deeper than our generation give them.
Sure. Because so I noticed, I watched one of your podcasts before, when you were talking in depth about your actual story, but I find it to be amusing, right? So like I love Sebastian Maniscalco, but when
Yes.
he talks about growing up Italian and in a
Yes.
household, it's a different environment back then because the relatable stuff now, what he says jokingly around, is so inhumanely true, right? About
Yes.
people coming over uninvited, or they're in the
Yes.
neighborhood and they knock
Yes.
on the door, right?
And then you
And
have to
and
feed them and
right.
coffee and all this.
And that's the thing, because our generation doesn't understand that when somebody hits the ring doorbell and you can see who's at the door, and if you don't want to talk to them, you don't answer the door, right? He talks about hiding behind the couch and turning off the lights and being silent. Whereas, like our generation, if somebody knocked on the door, everybody ran to the door to see who it was, right?
Oh,
You opened
100%.
it no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And if it was family on the other side, you didn't say, "Hey, how's it going? Have a good night," and what. You opened the door and said, "Come on in," right? And you
Yeah.
always had stuff ready to go, where
Yes.
I think that like when you watch Sebastian with like a
Yes.
younger generation, they don't understand the concept of what it was like to basically be able to go out on your own and your parents telling you to get out of the house, right?
Yes.
To not be inside, right? To
Mhm.
go out. And now this environment, right, where I see my friends' kids and they're being told like stranger danger, don't go outside, stay in the house.
Yeah.
Why would you want to go to the park when you can stay in the backyard? And it's like,
Yeah.
my parents were like, get out,
Yeah,
right?
all the
The
time.
sun's
I was
out. It's
not in the
time to
house.
go.
Mm-mm. I was
Yeah.
never in the house. And when my husband and I decided to have kids, because my husband is Italian as well, we decided to take a lot of the traditional values that our parents instilled in us into our children. So they
Mhm.
still use yes, sir, yes,
Right.
ma'am. They still hold the door for people. And I do think um, it's a lost talent to just to be humble
Sure.
like that.
Yeah.
But growing up Italian is it is, and I can bet you, Sebastian could probably tell you a few traumatic stories in his time. I
Yeah.
can tell you that there were probably a couple spoons broken
Yeah.
and
Right.
stuff like that. I mean, but to me that's funny because to
Yeah.
have an Italian spoon broken in your house is like not a big deal.
Right.
It's really not.
Yeah.
The
That's
trauma I went through was because I did not have, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen in Italian families, but I had an American mother.
Okay.
And so I think it shifted, it does shift. And when you
Yeah.
have any parent, American, any Italian, whatever, when a parent is a narcissist or is a gaslighter or simply just doesn't like their child, and listen, it happens a lot more than people think.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter what culture you're from. When you're like that, you're just like that. And
Right.
so I didn't have a choice but to step into a new career because I was thrown out of my family like
Yeah.
lickety split. So I had to figure it out, and I had to figure it out fast because even though I'm not making any money right now, I know that I have to because I have a
Yeah.
family and a home,
Sure.
and I don't want to leave my husband to do all of that.
Right.
So when I was fired by my father, it was so eye-opening. Like, I never saw that. I never saw
Hmm.
never in a million years. And I thought, well, I can't go into the same industry because I just can't. I cannot do the same business. It just would be too hard. I can't go back to teaching because I'm going to be 50. No school district is going to pay me the salary cap that because
Sure.
of all right. So, and I also thought the trifecta, I don't want to spend any money starting a new business. I just emotionally, mentally, physically can't
Hmm.
go there. What better way than to speak out about all of this?
Right.
Um, and at that point, I was like, well, their opinion no longer matters to me. And as long as I tell my story and I don't put my opinion in or anything like that, I just feel like they can't come after me in any law way. And I just want to be able to tell my story because I'd been silenced for so
Hmm.
long. And so I thought, what better way than to use this to start a new career and help someone?
Sure.
So that's how it was kind of born.
Okay. Now, I know you mentioned earlier about, faith and religion and stuff like that. Have you tried to reach out to tell your story through the church? Because they open a lot of their platforms to people that will come in to say, hey, listen, a
Mm,
member of our congregation is going through this, and you get to tell your story in front of them. And then not only, that you have, the education background of being a teacher, but also counseling kids with a story like this could be a very relatable thing
that's
when
all
you
I
might
want.
not
Yeah.
even think about that kind of being in that field where, you might be able to, integrate your story into somebody else because, there's a lot of kids that, in our generation, we call them runaways, right? If
Mhm.
they weren't happy with their home life, they packed up and left, right?
Yeah.
They weren't missing by any stretch of the imagination, but they just didn't, they opted not to stay home,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of their stories were all never heard because there was no way for them to tell it, right? But
Right.
now, like I said, you go to YouTube and you type,
It's right
kids
there.
that leave, there's thousands of stories with kids that'll tell you how they packed up a bag, whatever clothes they had, and they got out of their situation and they went to a friend's or they went to, or they just thrived on their own, right? They went,
Right.
to totally somewhere else. Where I think with the platforms we have now, with the social media aspect of it, a lot of these kids now will start a GoFundMe. Like they'll ask for
Which
help
is
to be
crazy.
like, I gotta get out of my situation, but I have no money. I'm trying to
Mhm.
raise $10,000 so I could, either buy a bus ticket or get an apartment or get like, and you'll see these GoFundMe's hit sometimes high five figures when
Yeah.
they're gone 10 times the amount of what they asked for.
And I
And
don't
it's
have
like,
that in me. I just feel like
right. And
for me, I feel so unethical, but I would 100% be down for speaking at a church because this is like
right.
such a great story to prove what you just said. I was driving to work on the day of the incident, and it really was like any other day. And for some reason, I mean, I pray every morning. That's just
Sure.
who I am. But for some reason, I started to cry out loud and I prayed and I was like, please, I asked God to
Right.
please like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I mean, I can remember crying and just saying, I don't know what to do. Please give me some guidance. And that day, I I was plucked out of work. I mean, my father
Mhm.
fired me, but I feel like by asking for help out loud, someone up above knew that I would never quit on my dad and I
Right.
would never leave him. And so they said, well, if she's not going to do it, we're going to do it for her. So
Sure.
someone up above plucked me out of the situation and here we sit today.
Right.
So I think that faith is really important and I would be so on board to doing something like that
Mhm.
because I think it's very valuable.
Okay, let me ask this question real quick just to get your
Sure,
opinion on something.
sure.
A lot of the old adages don't do business with family, right? Like that's kind of the age-old saying.
Mhm.
But there are a lot of families that have a family business that are successful and they all get along. In your situation, without going too in depth, would you say that you agree with that for the most part? Would you say it always ends up bad? Do you say it never turns out good? In your opinion, what do you think? And you can be honest.
I think it's a 50-50. I'm being 100% honest. And I'm pretty transparent. So if there's a deep story that matches this question, that's typically how I relate. Like I tell the story and it totally answers the question. But I think that it's a 50-50 shot if things are done right. Like you have to be fair and equitable. And if you have two kids who are hard workers, who put the work in, who put the time in, who execute things, who you trust as a parent to run your business when you're in another country, then yeah, I find that it can be extremely successful. But when there's a little bit of nepotism, which I understand happens all the time,
Mhm.
that's not an issue for me. I don't care. When a parent sits down, and I know it must be very hard when you're getting ready to retire, you don't want to walk away from a business that you have literally built from the ground up and made successful on your own. You know, my dad built this business from the ground up on his own, didn't borrow money from the bank, didn't
Sure.
ask family. I mean, it was sola mente, right? I would think that you would want to make sure that the business was placed in a way that was safe. And you can't do that when you have a partner who is a narcissistic gaslighting individual who only wants one child to run the business. So
Mhm.
that is a setup for failure in my opinion. I hope
Sure.
they're successful. I'm sure if they're listening to this conversation, that's going to drive them to want to be more successful. However, when you bring someone in who really doesn't have a lot of experience but wants to be in charge, that's when it becomes a problem.
Right.
And so I think that there was a shift when um the realization was, well, I personally would never for in this situation go 50-50 with my sibling in a
Right.
business like this. Uh, and my mother thought it was because of money. And I said to my father, listen, you know me. I'm not about being rich. For me, it's not about being rich. It's just being able to provide for my family.
Sure.
So me agreeing to the 49%, 51% was simply to business, not
Right.
personal. And I was very honest with my mother, my father, and my brother, and said to all three of them, I will never go 50-50. I just think that it's nothing against my family. It's business, right? I've been there 13 years
Mhm.
longer than my brother, right? So I said to my father, it's not about the money because I'll sign my name. We
Sure.
split the money 50-50. When it comes down to decisions that benefit the business, there needs to be one person to make the final decision and pull the plug. And I know that people understand that. They just didn't want it to be me.
Right.
They did not like the fact that I was saying all this. So I think that when you have the right structure, the right support, the right business plan, and you really step back and look at what's right, it can work. My father could have said, for poops and giggles, fine, we'll make it 49, 51% for 10 years. If after 10 years you guys are still running this business great, we're going to put it in a contract that it's 50-50. I would have said absolutely. None of them are smart enough to have even said that to me, you
Right.
know? because of my mother.
Yeah.
So I think that the setup that is currently in place in that business is probably the way that my mother and my brother want it. I'm not sure about my father, but he's complacent. So I'm assuming that it's status quo
Hmm.
now. But I can tell you, I knew once my brother came to work there that it was just a matter of time that I would be pushed out. So to come back full swing, again, it can work if it's
Sure.
done correctly.
Okay. That's a fair answer.
Mm.
How in your situation now has the conversation been had that if things do change and there is a shift, would you go back or are you completely done?
So the way that my mother works, um, I'm done. I'll not only will I never be allowed back, I think the only way that my father and I would ever speak again is if my mother died.
Hmm.
So sadly, that relationship
Sure. That,
has been is severed. So I don't think
okay.
that uh I don't think that they will ever reach out to me
Okay.
to try and resolve this. And let's say that they did, I would not go back to the business.
Okay. So my next question would have been then, had it have worked out, would this been a generational thing? Would you have wanted your kids to step into
Yes,
it and kind of okay, so
they
that's
wanted to.
okay.
They wanted to learn, and my youngest wanted, who's 16, kept telling my father, "I want to learn, I want to learn, I want to learn." He just blew my son off. He
Yeah.
blew him off. So we kind of all got it,
Sure.
and we were like, my husband and children and I were extremely close with my parents for a long time. My sister is not
Hmm.
involved in the business. She lives in Texas, and my brother was not involved in the business. He was in prison. So it was me, right? For so long. And then my brother steps back into our lives, which is great. We all embraced it.
Right.
But when you step back into when someone does that and you step back into their lives, you have to be humble. There's got
Sure.
to be some humility.
Right.
You make amends, you can say you made amends, but if you don't, it's very apparent. So once my brother stepped back into our lives, I knew that my time in my family was very
Sure.
short. And it was because uh, of how close my father and I were. And so my mother didn't like
Right.
that very much. So
Okay.
it's a sad situation,
Sure.
but um, I that business is extremely successful. I hope it stays that way. I just don't know. It's sad.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So now you have this story, right? And
Mhm.
you talk about that. Going on to your public speaking engagement, have you sat down and actually ran the numbers to see what it would be like if you wanted to monetize yourself and what you would be happy making or what you would ideally like to bring in or, sourcing, different avenues for yourself? Like, do you have like I know you said you want it to, you're building it from the ground up and you don't want to invest any money into it because you don't necessarily have to, but
Right.
have you kind of written down like an idea of like where you'd want to be and like how quickly you think you can get there? And is it obtainable?
So I love these questions. So I am that kind of person. I'm a little bit type A when it comes to that. I love a list of goals. I love timelines. Um, I have not sat down and run the numbers on what my time is worth yet because my generation, in my mind, I feel like I kind of have to pay my dues first by putting in
Hmm.
the work and coming onto these podcasts, which I love doing because I love chatting. Um, but I have a projected goal. I do have a goal of what I would love to make. I do want to write a book. So that's something that's on the list about this specific topic.
Correct.
But unlike my siblings and my parents, that's probably why they don't like me, but it's not for me, it's not about becoming a millionaire or being on the Forbes list or making a crap ton of money. All I want to be able to do is help my husband provide and go on vacation. Like that,
Right.
pay my bills and go on
Sure.
vacation. So for
Yeah.
me, I don't need to be, I don't, but I know that my story is worth something.
Sure.
And so at some point, I know that I will have to put a media kit together. And on that media kit will include what it would cost for me to not travel and speak and then travel and speak. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Now I'm new to this, so I kind of want to get a gist of it. Without getting too specific,
Mhm.
what would a low end price be where it would be equitable for you to say travel and speak? And then what would like a high end be? Do you have like, it doesn't have to be an exact dollar amount, but like just an idea of like, what you would expect?
So starting now from zero, right? I like literally had zero expectations. And then when I was invited tentatively to speak at this women's conference, I started thinking and I started picking brains and looking it up. And, it can go one of two ways. I can either go to Arkansas, and they will pay my flight and my hotel, and then I speak for free, or they pay all three. I will not be paying for my flight and hotel. If they say that
Okay.
that's not something we can swing, unfortunately, I would have to gracefully bow out because um, I'm not saying I won't ever invest in myself. I'm just
Right.
saying that I can't right now.
Sure.
So I'm perfectly, if in 10 years I'm making really good money and I want to attend a conference and learn, I will absolutely invest in that stuff because you can
Hmm.
only grow from that stuff.
Right.
But right now, I feel like what I bring to the table is okay. And so on the low end would be something like that where they pay my flight and my hotel and I speak for free, right? That's like to me that's great.
Right.
In middle of the road, for me to drive myself and speak at a conference in Boston on the middle of the road end would be like maybe 250 an hour.
Okay.
On the higher end, when I start to become a little bit more of like people are actually reaching out, for me to travel to I don't know, let's say Louisiana, right?
Hmm.
And then I would have to fly, stay, and speak. It would be like 750 an hour.
Okay.
And that's not just speaking. That would be from the time that I leave Connecticut, land in Louisiana, and then fly back. It would be like
Right.
the whole time that I'm there, right?
Sure.
Because that's time away from family and home.
Right.
So that would be on the higher end.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I was just curious because, like, I always am intrigued about like booking yourself, right? And
Yeah,
like, how do you and get to the point where they ask you to speak versus you asking them, hey, if there's a spot for me,
yeah.
and then have you gone to like other conferences or gone to other people to see how they do it and what their presentation is like, you know?
So
Because it's different watching it
yeah.
on a YouTube channel or on a even like a TV show versus
Mhm.
actually seeing somebody in person with their stage set up and their
Yeah.
background, and how they present themselves, right? Because a lot of times that I've seen, right? Because I've gone to a couple conventions where they'll have a conversation where it's just two chairs, right? And they're
Mm,
wearing the headset and it's just two people talking back and forth, and then the one person will get up and tell what they have to say based on whatever it is, if it's
yeah.
marketing or social media or presence or growing, and a lot of people have their own ideas of what to do, right? And so like, oh, one of the main characters that like we kind of had in our old business was Fraser Brooks, right? Because he basically tells you how to market yourself, right?
Yeah.
And he will tell you that what to look at in terms of going from 0 to 1 million subscribers if you take these steps. Now obviously everybody's different, right? Because there
Mm,
are people that are more likable and more approachable and more flamboyant, or they've had experience with theater and being on stage, so
yeah.
they
Mhm.
have that kind of whimsicalness to them where they can harness energy in the room versus somebody who might not have the experience and they're going through it, and like they might make a joke and no one laughs and they're like, okay, now
Oh
what do
my
I do,
gosh, no,
right?
that's the
So
worst.
it's those things, right, where it's
Yes.
like, But when you have somebody like in your corner that you can turn to, I'm sure that helps. Have you kind of been in that spectrum yet now of stuff or
So I have been to some conferences, but not in this particular niche or this
okay,
one that we're talking about. It was something
sure,
academic, always academic for me, because I have an undergraduate degree in education and a master's in linguistics. Like I'm always like
sure,
chasing the next brain filler. But I've never been to a conference or a convention that is about this
okay,
topic. And
right,
I got to tell you, me being invited to that tentatively, because nothing's set in stone
sure,
yet, and I'm praying, was by chance. I mean, I just happened to be on the right podcast at the right time, and
right,
she asked me, "Do you mind?" She asked me to come on twice, so it was a two-part podcast, which is due to be released July 2nd. But she's like, "Do you mind after the second one?" She's like, "Do you mind staying back after and chatting?" And I was like, "Sure." So we were chatting, and she's like, what are your long-term goals?" Because it really just takes one. It just
sure.
takes one.
That's it, right?
She's like, what are your long-term goals? And I told her the same thing I told you. Like, I would love to make this my career, telling my story, speaking out. I can educate people on family trauma. I can give you data, statistics, but really what matters is the authenticity of the story. That's what
Sure.
people relate to. So she's like, well, I would love for you to think about collaborating. I'm putting
Okay.
together a conference. So hopefully, knock on wood, I'm like, I will not only be speaking, but I'll be learning, because this will be like the first time I'll be at a convention. But
Hmm.
I market, I have no problem going up to the most important person in the room at some point when they least expect it. And when no one's paying attention, and
Right.
tapping them on the shoulder, being like, hey, I'm Gina. Nice to meet you. I don't know if I did a good job, but I would love to chat with you. Like, you
Sure.
just, so I think that going to the conventions is definitely my cousin Brittany said going to the conventions and the conferences is how she started. So it's probably a really good place to start.
Right. And they are, right? And the only reason why I ask is because, it's like anything else, right? You can use all the skills that you've obtained over the course of your life,
Mhm.
personally and professionally, into your story, right? So being able to talk in a classroom is kind of
Yeah.
the same thing, and having people entertained is
Hmm.
kind of the same thing when you're on stage, just at a bigger event. But it's the same concept inherently, right? You
Yeah.
need to engage with people, and you have to give the information to them, and they have to be able to understand it and use what you told them to go out and perform at their level. So inherently it's no different. But I always like to get, people's perspective on how they would do something, or like how they feel like their presentation would be. Is it more fun loving? Is it more stern? Is it more, feel sorry for me? Is it more an eye-opening experience? Because a lot of times people might be able to use your story in something completely irrelevant to them,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the baseline is still the same, that
Hmm.
you were presentable, you were likable, and then people would, word of mouth would say, hey, this
Yeah.
Gina talked at the thing and she stole the show. You
Yep.
might not have even
That's
been the
the
keynote,
plan.
right? Right.
Yes.
So that's, and ideally, that's kind of like where I wanted to pick your brain about. Have you seen anybody that you kind of want to emulate in how they do things, or their stage setup, or their
No.
presence on what they use, right? Because obviously you're your own person and you don't want to steal anybody's
Right.
idea. But at the same point, if somebody has a much bigger platform, but they're doing a specific thing that's working for them, and you take a little bit and pick a little bit and turn it into your own, but
Hmm.
you still have the ideology of the
Yeah.
person that you once watched, right? So it's kind of, I
I
I
don't have
like to
that
get the
vision yet.
perspective on that.
I don't have that vision yet. I haven't even thought about that. So you're raising a lot of really good things for me to think about, because all of these things are like kind of important. But I have not thought about like one, like, when I was refinishing furniture, there were tons of those, like people that
Sure.
I wanted to emulate, and people, I would
Yeah.
maybe take a trick or a tip and spin it into my own. I I haven't done that this time.
Yeah.
I kind of want to I feel like my story is very intense and very deep, and one that uh, a lot more people can relate to than people actually know,
Sure.
because people are so afraid to talk out about this stuff. That I feel like my story is unique in and of itself. And
Right.
so I think at some point I will probably start to see other people's conferences and say, oh, maybe I can put my own little spin on something like that. Then, if the next time I speak. So I feel like I haven't gotten there yet. I'm trying to be like, I'm ADHD. So I'm trying to
Sure.
be as patient and non impulsive as possible, because at my age, changing a career of this, like, it's like a
Sure.
180.
Right.
I only get one shot.
Yeah. But
So I feel
then,
like if
you
this
have to,
happened when I was 30, I would be like
right.
Kathy from the newspaper. My hair would
Yeah.
be everywhere. But at 50, I feel like I can take it in stride, and I I
Sure.
I'm so determined. So I feel like right now I have my own little spin, but that's not to say that I won't find
Right.
something that will work for me. And that's okay. I hope that one day someone sees me and wants to
Yeah.
kind of do the same thing. I would be
Right.
honored.
Sure. But you also have to look at it too, though, right? Like you have all this experience in life under your belt, right?
Mm.
So at 50, you've had a life to live, right? You've had real life experiences. At 30, you haven't had those yet, right? So now you're at a chapter in your life where it might actually resonate with more people, because how many people, right, out there are in a job that they hate, right? They can't stand it and they wish they could get out on their own, right?
Yeah.
And that's the one thing, like I mentioned before on my podcast with some guests, is that I really do love about this generation of kids, right? Because they're being told now to invest in themselves, right?
Yes.
To
Yes.
make things work for them, right?
Yes.
My parents told me get a blue collar job, work for the city, work for a municipality, get a pension and retire, right? They never said start your own business, be your
Follow
own
your
boss.
dreams.
Right. No one ever said that, right? The
No.
dream was to get a job working for somebody else because you got a paycheck, you can work a career and get a pension and get out, right? And
Correct.
that's all pretty much our generation, right? But this generation of 15 and 16-year-olds, they're being told to invest in themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Why
Start your own investment, be your own boss, don't work for anybody else, right? You control the scenario.
not?
Where our generation was the exact opposite. We were told to, you just go and conform, do your thing, be happy with the money you're making, get out and then enjoy the rest of your life basically until
Yeah,
you die,
and
right?
growing up in an Italian family, it
Sure.
was so, I mean, I had a curfew till I went to
Right.
college, right? I went to college. I would come home from college for the
Sure.
summer, and I had a curfew at
Yeah.
24.
Right.
I mean, it was very strict. So in my culture, a lot of Italian cultures, the father kind of tells you what you're going to do for your career. And I wanted to be an attorney,
Mhm.
and my father told me no. He said, the world has enough attorneys. You need to be a teacher. So that's what I did. But I never
Right.
truly, I loved it, but it wasn't something I truly felt I was meant to do. Once I
Sure.
got my master's in linguistics, I kind of felt like, okay, this is something I
Right.
love. But if I was going to, with my master's in linguistics, I wanted to teach like college or
Right.
people who
Sure.
don't understand the study of language. Like, I didn't want to teach. I did want to teach the little guys, but I would have liked to have expanded to a different area, and I was told no. And then
Right.
when I was done teaching, I went and worked for the family business. I couldn't have done anything. I didn't really want to do anything else. I
Right.
always wanted to work at the family business. And the only reason I wanted to be an attorney was because I was told I couldn't work at the family business. So,
Yeah.
it's hard. And I think
Sure.
that my son is 16 and my other son is going to be 19. Yes, we support them, as we always say, as long as it's legal and you're clothed.
Sure. Right.
You be ambitious, go
Yeah.
after it. Ain't nobody going to do it for you, honey.
Right.
I can certainly try, but they're going to look at me like I'm the crazy mom trying to take care of my 28-year-old son. So
Yeah.
you have to advocate for yourself. And that's like the one thing I like about that generation, is that they really are doing it for themselves. And I think that because of that leeway, I feel like my kids, they could potentially do some good things.
Right. And so it's kind of amusing, right? Because we taught, like, obviously we're very similar in age, and I talked to all my college buddies and my high school buddies. YouTube didn't exist
No.
back then, but if YouTube did exist, right?
Oh my
And
god.
you look at the stories and the
I would
things
have been
that
Miss
you did,
Rachel.
right?
Yes.
That's the thing, right? And that's
Yes.
what this generation doesn't understand,
No,
right? Because
it's
you
great.
have like, and I always use Mr. Beast an example, right?
Yes.
He's 14 years old. He starts
My
a YouTube
son
channel.
loves him.
Right. It's just hanging out with your friends. And then all of a sudden, the world says, well, I want to see you hang out with your friends, right? Now at 21, he's a millionaire, right? He's got a huge channel, right?
A
And
huge
now
house that my
at
son loves.
30,
Yes,
right? And now it's like he built a
an empire.
platform
Yes.
that other 14-year-old kids would have done the same thing if we had it in our generation, right? I
I
look at all my friends and said, listen, if we were on YouTube, we'd be famous, right?
I'd be
Like this,
huge because I'm so animated. I would have
right.
been like honed in on little kids. I would have been Miss Rachel and I would have been a
Yeah.
millionaire.
Right. And I think that's the difference where
Yes.
a lot of this generation can use that to their advantage, where
Mhm.
our generation didn't have that, right? There was no, unless you were lucky enough to have one of those old school VHS recorders that was on your shoulder, when you
Which I
take to a
did.
baseball game or right.
Yes,
But that was our social media
that
back
was
then,
our
right?
social media.
Was filming a family party and then laughing at everybody and the things that they said. And it was
Yes.
like, oh, I can't believe Uncle
And
so
you
and so
can't
said
edit
this or
it.
Aunt.
You couldn't
Right.
do
And
anything like
that's raw, right?
yes.
That's a family argument
Maybe that's
unfolding
why
in
I
front
like
of you.
rawness. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, it's quirky because, now you can basically film everything, right? You can, and I love filming the older generation or being around them because you hear the stories, you hear
Yeah.
the, oh, you should have saw, your great grandfather, and they tell the stories of the
Mhm.
legacies that came before us, and especially, in an Italian household, right? Like we're both from one, right? But it's a different kind of lineage, right?
Yes.
Because you have the old school of them coming from Italy to America
Yeah.
and having it documented for the first time, right?
Yeah,
You
because
go
I'm
to,
first
you can,
generation
right.
American.
So you can go to Ellis and see the
Yes.
transcripts, right? And
It's
how
amazing.
crazy it was because people would change their last name and go back 3 or 4 times. And there was no it was a pencil and an eraser, right?
Yeah.
So if you said, "Oh, I'm so and so," and they're like, "Oh, well, you've already been here," like, "Oh, no, no, it's just dropped. It's an
Yes,
I or an
yes, yeah,
O
yeah,
or
yeah.
an E or right." And so they would just erase it and write. So you could have 4 or 5 families of the same lineage with
I
different last
know.
names because it was so crude
It was
when
so
when
common.
they did
Yeah.
it right. And so
Mhm.
now when you come over, it's all computer. Your face is there. It's
Yeah,
recognition. You
fingerprints, it's
can't
all
make it twice.
computerized. Yeah,
Right.
no.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's a different generation, but growing up in that environment and hearing the stories of how they came here, and then establishing themselves, that's why I think it's relatable when you get people that talk about these stories, right? And it's not just an Italian thing, it's an Irish thing, it's a Polish thing, it's
Yes,
a
absolutely.
Hispanic thing, right? A
It could
lot
be
of
an
the
American thing.
right. But
100%.
it's just so unique to like having it done, in terms of what you can talk about and what transcripts, and growing up in it, and especially with your story, it probably resonates even more.
And in an Italian family, here comes the joke. It, it's like the mafia.
Right.
People think the mafia is the only people who say, what happens in the family stays in the family. No, that's all Italians,
Yeah.
mafia or not.
Right.
Like I should not be speaking to you right now about any of this.
Yeah.
And so but it's also unheard of for an Italian parent to turn their back on their kid.
Sure.
So, or any
Any
cultural
parent.
parent,
Right. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Um,
That's
so I think that it's twofold that fine, you're going to shut the door on me. Guess what? You're not going to shut me up.
right.
So I think the generational, it could be anywhere. Yeah. It's hard to imagine uh, any of that not
Right.
being documented or talked about. And
Sure.
it was insane. And I hope that, maybe I can come back in and tell you the full story because you
Right.
never know, some of your listeners.
Yeah, I would love to have you do that.
Yeah, I would love
And
that. One listener could be sitting here saying,
right.
dang, I want to hear this story. Let me
Yeah.
tell you, if you're listening, it's an absolutely
Well, we'll definitely have you back on for a part two to tell your story.
I love it.
I was just kind of wondering as we wrap things up now, do you think there's going to be, obviously you start telling your story, you hear it, your family hears it. Do you have any type of concern that there might be some, type of resentment long term,
Just
or
one
that they're going
person.
to tell you to be quiet and not say anything like,
I just think
or
one
do
person is
you,
gonna try and retaliate.
okay.
That's the
So,
only concern I
s-
have.
oh, perfect. So then you don't really have
And that
anything,
person, she's not in my life, my mother.
right.
I was, it was always super hyper vigilance, always. Um,
Hmm.
I'm always scared. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop because she's always planning something. She's
Sure.
always like, so like my 50th birthday is coming. I am so scared. I can't stop thinking about it that she is going to do something to ruin my birthday because the incident that we keep referencing happened on my father's birthday. So when you
Okay.
have a narcissistic gaslighting parent, you ruined someone's birthday, I'm going to come after yours. So
Right.
that's really the only thing that I'm
Sure.
concerned about.
Okay.
But their opinion and their thoughts no longer matter to me.
Okay.
When they threw
That
me
that's
out,
fair.
then yeah.
Right. So, with wrapping things up, what would be one last thing that you would want to tell my audience about you and what you have going on in the future, where they could find you, and what platforms you use? So I'll link them all in the bio in the
I love
YouTube
it.
video. But if you could wrap up this
Sure.
whole conversation in one kind of thought, what would that thought be?
I get that question a lot. So I'm all over social media. Gina Giampietro, Sanded Edges Furniture underscore. I can also send you those links. But I think that to wrap it all up and bring it home is, you never know how strong you truly are until you're forced to sit down and think about it. And I never in a million years thought that I was strong enough to do any of this, to pick up the pieces, to move on without my parents and my siblings. So for me, I am a lot stronger than I thought I was. And people will surprise themselves. And I just hope that, this new venture, people will embrace it and allow me to be heard and tell my story. And I just thank everyone who's allowed it so far.
Sure. Well, Gina, you've been a great guest. I'd love to have you back on to tell the full story because now I'm kind of intrigued as to what exactly
Yeah.
happened, right? And what goes on to it. And again, I believe you when you say people can relate to it because everybody knows a family that had arguments and disagreements and lost the business because of just the most ridiculous things. And I know one personally because my cousins went through it. So like I
There you
have that
go.
whole like side of the thing, right? And so and it almost became like a very public story in terms of like how it went. But they kind of they didn't make
It
amends, and now the father's passed, and there's no way that
can't go back.
they can reboot it. So I do think with you telling your story, everybody can say, well, yeah, I know a family, or I have one myself that went through it and can
And then you
understand. And
don't feel so alone.
right. And then I'd love to have you come back though and to just
I would
start
love it.
with your story and tell it,
Yeah.
because now I think people are going to be intrigued and be like, well, what was it, right? What was
Right?
the business? What did they do? How
Cliffhanger.
did this happen? So
Want to
we'll
know.
definitely set that up again and
Yes.
do that. But in the meantime, until that happens, I wish you the best with the speaking
Thank you.
engagements. I hope everything works out well for you. I'll link all your
Likewise.
socials in the bio, and then
Perfect.
this video will be up on YouTube as soon as I do some editing. It'll be later on today, and I'll send you the link and you can
Awesome.
have it to share. So we'll go from there.
Thank you so much.
All right, Gina. Well, I am the One Fun Guy podcast again. Thank you for watching. This video will be up on YouTube in a little bit, and we'll see everybody on the next one. Take care.